Welcome back to another episode of The Hardcore Casual with your boy, Bass the Kid. As always, please like and subscribe and share with a friend, a colleague, a relative, an associate, an immediate family member, an enemy, and anyone in between. Doing this one pretty late, just come back from the gym. It's early hours of the morning. Should have done it earlier, but you know what? We're here now. When you wake up, if you're in the UK, you see it nice in your notifications, and if you're in the US, you get to see it just before you go to bed. So happy days for everyone. Few bits and pieces to talk about because there's been quite a lot of fights either mandated or not being made at this point. I want to give my take on a couple of them, so without further ado, let's get into it. So it's been officially ordered from reports that I've seen that Joshua Buatsi and Dan Aziz, the number 1 and number 2 in the WBA at light heavyweight, have been put into a final eliminator, with the winner scheduled to be the mandatory challenger for Dimitri Bivol. It was inevitable. I mean, everyone kind of knew the writing was on the wall as soon as Joshua Buatsi signed with Sky Sports and Boxer that this is the fight that would happen. I think the initial idea was that it would happen maybe 2 or 3 fights down the line, but I guess with the lackluster showing that Joshua had in his previous fight, his return fight to Sky Sports, I guess they thought, well, we've invested this money in him, we kind of got to try and get this one over the line sooner rather than later. Plus it's a good look and a very good payday for someone like Dan Aziz as well. So it almost is like a win-win. Again, maybe happened a bit too soon for their liking, but ultimately we're here. Now, Eddie Hearn has come out and basically said that, dropped a bombshell, that Dan Aziz, from what he understands, is actually now a free agent and is no longer in a deal with Sky Sports and Boxer. And he said if that's the case, he would like to offer Dan the Dimitri Bivol fight outright. He can have it as a voluntary, he doesn't have to go through this other fight beforehand. Now, I saw a video earlier on today from Hatman, who basically said that Eddie Hearn doing that is more than likely a way of spiting Sky Sports and Boxer or Joshua Buatsi, or potentially both. And that's him more being petty because Dan Aziz should have to earn the shot. He shouldn't just be gifted it. He would much rather see Buatsi versus Bivol anyway rather than Dan Aziz, etc, etc. Now, with regards to that, here's what I want to say. If Dan Aziz gets offered a shot and he's a free agent and he's allowed to take that shot, I see no problem with that whatsoever. At the end of the day, I disagree with Hatman 100% on this one. Dan Aziz, as a pro, has actually accomplished more than Joshua Buatsi has at the moment. Southern area, English, Commonwealth, British, European. Joshua Buatsi's only ever won the British and the IBF European title, which means absolutely nothing. So when you look at it, and both of those, essentially, Buatsi vacated straight after winning them. He didn't defend either of them. You know, you got Dan Aziz basically trying to win the British outright, which is something that not very many people do these days. And he's now the European champion. There's only one step you go after European, and that's to the world level. So he's definitely earned a shot. So if he gets it without necessarily having to go through the final eliminator, I'm not going to be moaning. At the end of the day, Joshua Buatsi was offered that same shot last year without actually earning that shot, and he turned it down. So I don't think you should now be almost poo-pooing the fact that, you know, Dan Aziz is of the opportunity to get that. I'd find that basically, you know, very, very bad mind on Hatman's part, quite frankly. Now, if that does happen, obviously, then that leaves Joshua Buatsi with, I guess, another mandatory he'd have to face. Have to find someone else for that shot. He would still end up getting a shot afterwards should he win that final eliminator. But at this point, with everything as it is, yeah, I mean, that's definitely going to be his route because he's never going to be allowed a voluntary. Is it petty from Eddie Hearn? Quite possibly. It might very well be. It might be a bit of a nasty sort of a mean streak within him, but it's also a great opportunity for Dan Aziz, and I'm never gonna go against Dan Aziz getting opportunities, because if anyone deserves to maybe get quote unquote a handout, it's him. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that one. If that fight happens, Dan against Josh, I'm here for it. If Dan Aziz manages to get the voluntary title shot, I'm here for that. To be honest, I'm probably here for that even more, because like I said, he's had a hard road. Why not get a little bit of a handout? That's my thoughts on it. So earlier on in the week, people were reporting that Dillian Whyte essentially priced himself out of a fight with Anthony Joshua for August the 12th, whereby he was asking for £10 million for the fight. Basically, I've heard from several different places, and Eddie Hearn also confirmed that he never asked for that amount of money. So everyone who's been reporting that is I want to find out where they got those sources from. I've actually heard the number that he was asking for, and if I compare that with what he was potentially offered at the time, I actually agree that he was right not to take it, or at least to ask for more. But I guess with the time frame that's kind of gone on, I understand that they got to look for different options. Now, quite frankly, if you guys remember, back in 2019, a similar thing happened. It was supposed to be Joshua against Whyte. Joshua was sort of dilly-dallying, trying to get some other fights in. I think he was trying to make a Tyson Fury and a Deontay Wilder fight, which fair enough, that makes sense. Dillian was, waiting around, said, no, I'm not here to wait. Like, I've got my own career. I'm not just going to be waiting on you. And then I think he was offered at the time £4 million, £3.5 to £4 million. He basically turned that down and said, well, no, like, I want more, basically, because I know what this is going to generate on pay-per-view. I know what you're going to get, and I'm not even getting a part of the pay-per-view revenue. So if you're not going to give me a slice of that pie, then you're going to have to up the other money. Then I think eventually he did accept it, but what he then said was, I want to have control of the rematch. I don't know if he wanted particularly the lion's share, but he was like, well, look, I want control of the rematch if I beat you. And they basically sent him a contract where the terms of the rematch was there, and how much he was going to make or whatever, and he was still going to be ultimately the B-side and blah, blah, blah. Which, look, commercially, he always was going to be. So, yes, he kind of threw his toys out of the pram a little bit, but I understand it from, that man's position. I've beat you, and now you still want me to be jumping through hoops afterwards. And he even said, look, they gave me a lowball offer because they wanted to fight Jerome Miller in New York. And Eddie Hearn even came out in interviews and admitted that the offer that was given to Dillian Whyte was not one that he believed would get the fight over the line. So it does seem like Anthony Joshua has a habit of offering Dillian Whyte less than he knows Dillian is willing to accept for a fight, and that we've got evidence of that on several occasions, even though Dillian is obviously the one turning down the fight. And whether you believe that to be right or wrong, it's your own choice. So ultimately, now you've got Anthony Joshua with potential options for this August 12th, although there's also now rumors that he may just sit out for this skills challenge in the December thing. But if we go with the options, so one of the names that have been touted is Ajit Kabayel, who to me doesn't make sense, purely because if you're fighting Deontay Wilder, you need to fight someone that has similar measurements or a similar type of style or a similar temperament, or something that basically gets you in the mode, in that mindset, to be able to then go into the ring with him. It's one continuous training regime and training session for you to hone into that big fight. So the Jermaine Franklin fight never really made much sense. And then an Ajit Caballero fight would make no sense because Caballero is nothing like Deontay Wilder. So you're training for him to then have to change up and do a totally different type of style for Deontay Wilder. Now me, some of you may have seen on Twitter, I put that Anthony Joshua versus F.A. Ajagba. It makes sense. At one point, F.A. Ajagba was looked at as the new Deontay Wilder. Didn't really have the quote-unquote the fundamentals down, but had the devastating right hand. Very, very tall, very long reach as well. A lot of things are similar. He's 6'6". I think he's got like an 82-inch reach. I think at one point it was quoted as being 85, but they've since reduced it, I think, to that 82, which is very similar. I think is the same reach that Anthony Joshua has. Yeah, so 6'6", so virtually eye level with Joshua. Wilder being 6'7". It's perfect preparation. They have similar movements. They have similar body mechanics and frame. So F.A. Ajagba is a perfect tune-up type of opponent, or a perfect practice for someone like Deontay Wilder, minus the erraticness. But ultimately, to me, that makes sense. Now, we haven't heard who the other two are, but the three names that I heard, two names. I heard Filip Hrgović and Ajit Caballero. Hrgović maybe would be similar in that frame. Caballero, no. It's not worth doing a Caballero fight, not from a monetary standpoint, because you can give Anthony Joshua a knockover. That's not an issue. It's just the fact of it needs to be able to prepare him for his next fight, and Caballero doesn't do that. So there's no real point having that matchup. But for me, it's F.A. Ajagba, Filip Hrgović would be two that if you're going to try and use a named opponent as well. There's a couple others, but when it comes to sort of the height and the reach, those are some of the better options. So we'll see what happens, whether the fight takes place. Obviously, Dillian Whyte's out of the running now. We'll see if there is an August 12th. But to me, as I said, F.A. Ajagba, that's the way to go. Oh, and since we're going to talk about things that I say on Twitter, well, last week, on the way to the gym, I put on there, I wouldn't be surprised if Derek Chisora is going to face Francis Ngannou in December for that big Saudi Arabia show. Made too much sense in my head. Well, lo and behold, Eddie Hearn has come out, I think on the MMA Hour, saying that from what he understands, Skills Challenge are trying to actually make that fight. Now, look, I don't know if any of these people is actually monitoring my Twitter account, but if you are, you better start paying me some royalties, because I keep dropping these gems, I keep giving out these ideas, and all of a sudden I keep seeing them just all over my Twitter space, or they happen somewhere down the line. Like, come on, start paying your way. I think I deserve that, whomever it may be. But yeah, interesting one, and like I said, that's another thing that just makes sense. And now, since we've kind of gone down the theme of fights that have potentially been ordered or signed but aren't actually happening or may not happen, let's talk about probably the biggest one this week, which is David Benavidez and David Morrell Jr. Now, I heard back in March, so this is when Jose Benavidez Sr., so David's father, was on a podcast or an interview, and he basically said that they had signed a new deal with the PBC for David, and the fights of that contract would be David Morrell. It was Caleb Plant, it's David Morrell, it was Jamal Charlo, and possibly Demetrius Andrade, right? So you then had Samson Lukowicz, who is basically one of the slimiest managers in the game right now, supposedly put out this fake offer to Canelo Alvarez with a 1-week deadline on it, and then withholds and pulls that contract back, even though we had been told that a Morrell fight had been agreed in principle and signed before that contract even went out. So for those people that obviously don't keep up with all of the news that goes on, it just makes it like, oh well, Canelo don't want the fight, so we've had to go elsewhere. Whereas the people in the know realize, no, well, you said that fight was signed from day, and now you're just basically riding Canelo's coattails. It's a very common PBC tactic. Talk about the biggest guy, talk about wanting to fight them, end up fighting someone else. It happens with them very, very often. But on this occasion now, there's the plot twist, because Samson Lukowicz came out about a week ago basically saying, yeah, it was agreed in principle, or a few days, it's agreed in principle, David Morrell will be the fight sort of around October, November time. Again, so you say that, but then also you didn't want to allow Canelo additional time for a September fight, but you're not fighting until October, November. Anyway, David Benavidez comes out and says, I don't know what's going on. People keep talking about David Morrell. I've not signed anything to fight David Morrell. As far as I'm not fighting David Morrell next. Not anything I've heard. I'm trying to make the big fights. I'm trying to fight Jaime Munguia since he's come up to 168. Now, I actually don't blame him for wanting to fight Jaime Munguia, because that's a very, I'm not going to say it's an easy win for him, but it's a much more winnable fight, and it's a much bigger fight in which he will get paid a lot more money. Marketing wise, marketability wise, Jaime Munguia is quite marketable, so I give him that. But that then tells me, well, who is lying here? Is it Samson Lukowicz? Is it Jose Benavidez Sr.? Is it David? Was the Morrell fight really there and he just didn't want it, so now he's trying to swerve and act like he didn't know anything about it? Was Samson Lukowicz like using David's name to garner interest to say, oh well, we couldn't get that one over the line in the end, so now we're gonna go elsewhere? Did they sign that fight and then only use Canelo's name just to try and promote that moving forward? Interesting. But you had David Morrell come out now and basically say that he just said that he's a fat kid, like, with no confidence. Obviously he used to be a very fat kid. They did boxing to lose weight. We're talking about Benavidez here, and yeah, like he's just a fat kid, overweight, no confidence, doesn't believe in himself, like he's scared of me. I've been trying to fight him for years, he's not on it, and he basically saying he thinks he's the Mexican monster. There's no monster in him. And he couldn't even walk down the streets of Cuba and not get his shoes taken. Like, he basically just went in on David Benavidez. And to be honest, I love to see it, because Benavidez, if a lot of you don't know, he was the reason the Caleb Plant fight never happened back in 2019 when they was initially supposed to fight. And some people thought, oh, Caleb Plant was ducking Benavidez. No, that's not what happened at all. Caleb Plant wanted the fight, and it was Samson Lukowicz that said, no, we're not going to do that fight right now. If anything, we need to marinate it. It needs to, so that we can put it on pay-per-view in 2, 3, 4 fights down the line. And then he ended up losing his belt. Once on the scale to cocaine, another time on the scale to food. So at that point, Caleb Plant said, well, what am I fighting you for? You ain't got nothing I want. You don't deserve this shot. Like, I did what I needed to do. I stayed in shape. You didn't. But then obviously he then lost to Canelo Alvarez, and then that fight made more sense. And we saw what happened in that one. So it's going to be interesting now to see who David Benavidez ultimately fights. But what I can say is, if it's not David Morrell, and it's definitely not going to be Canelo, Jaime Munguia, I'll accept. Anything other than that, then again, we know what the play is. It's to take soft touch after soft touch after soft touch until you can get that option with Canelo. Because at this point in time, he can't even call for a mandatory. That's the thing, because he's the WBC interim, so he could really push and campaign for a mandatory if he really wanted to. But he's not, and the reason he's not is because he knows, and PBC know, that if they go to purse bids, they're either going to have to pay a crazy amount of money to get Canelo over, or they're going to get outbid by DAZN, which is probably the more likely thing that's going to happen. And Samson Lukowicz has said on several occasions that he would not send David Benavidez over to DAZN to fight Canelo. It's in several interviews. You can go and you can Google search them, you can search YouTube to find those interviews, and that's the reason why they're not pushing for that mandatory. So for all of this, Canelo fight me talk, they don't really want the fight because they're not prepared to do it unless it's on PBC and they've got home advantage. And again, if you don't believe me, you can just look. There's evidence all over the place. I just give you the info. It's up to you to do the research to see if you think I'm chatting shit or not. But I'm very confident in what I'm saying. I've seen enough of it, and I've seen enough of these patterns over the last couple of years. So yeah, look, that's my take on it all. There was a couple other bits I was going to talk about, but I'm going to cut this video now. So thank you lot very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, as I said before. Monetization is coming very, very soon. I'll talk about that on the next one. But for right now, it's the Hardcore Casual out.